Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, a weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me this week, Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cam?
Hey, what's going on?
What's going on is you and I have been watching some movies, playing some games, watching some TV, so we got lots to cover today.
It was a good Turkey Day weekend.
Both of us had the last 4 days off, so that was quite nice. So yes, we're gonna kick off with a movie roundup. We both watched Wish over the holiday weekend, independently of one another, so we haven't really talked too much about it. I also sat down and watched Blue Beetle on HBO Max, and then we're gonna dive into Games Talk, where Cameron has been playing Like a Dragon Gaiden, The Man Who Erased His Name, and I went back and finished Horizon Forbidden West: Burning Shores. And then we're going to wrap up with some TV talk, where both of us watched Invincible Season 2 and Scott Pilgrim Takes Off in kind of the animated space. So, yeah, busy episode. Let's before we dive in, if you like what you hear, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. So, Cam, I want you to kick me off. And of these things, we're going to be largely spoiler-free, but once we get into Invincible Season 2 and Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, it'll probably make just the most sense to dive into spoilers in those things. So those two topics at the end, that's why we're putting them at the end, will be more spoiler-heavy than the other stuff. We'll have timestamps, as we always do. But before we dive into any of those spoilery things, Cam, kick me off with Wish, which you went and saw on Thanksgiving with your family, and you saw it, and I was like, oh, that's right, that's out this weekend. I wasn't doing anything on Friday, so I went and saw it Friday just by myself.
Yep.
So tell me what you thought of Wish.
I really liked Wish. Wish is, I think the thing about Wish is it has probably the wildest meta narrative that a Disney movie has ever had. And when I say that, what I mean is the Disney references in this movie are thick.
Because, I mean, the Wreck-It Ralph movies exist.
That's true. The Wreck-It Ralph movies, I feel like there's a bit more of like a modern context, and this is it's all about the classic Disney motifs. Mm-hmm. Whether it's like the OG Walt Disney films are firmly represented in this movie, as well as with a couple of like other notes from other very popular films. There's just so much that's going on here. The film is literally the basis of When You Wish Upon a Star. And it's kind of like explored in a lot of different ways, a lot of different things, from whether it's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Cinderella, Pinocchio. Like, it's all in there. The gamut is filled. It's all here. There's references to everything and anything. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't take away from telling just a solid, good story. And that is pretty well executed. I think that there's a bit of like a few drop-offs. I don't think Chris Pine's A Villain Song is that iconic, but I think that it's passable and good. I feel like there's a lot of like motifs and stuff in here that are from other places as well, but I feel like as far as the original stuff in this movie, like, it's good. I wouldn't say like it's in like the upper Disney pantheon, but I think if you're even if you're a minor Disney fan like myself, from a major Disney fan like yourself, like, we're definitely going to find a lot more out of this movie than we get than if it was just a movie played straight. I don't think this is going to be like any young kid's favorite Disney film of all time. I don't think it's going to reach that point, but I do think that it does hit and it does nail what it needs to for it to be a good movie and a really awesome experience if you're a Disney fan and you're a fan of Disney's history of its animated films. And even like Pixar films and other stuff like that. There's tons of stuff in here from all of those. And it really feels like this is just a very big love letter to Disney. And so overall, I think good movie.
Yeah, I think the whole tagline of this one has largely been like a story 100 years in the making, because obviously it's coming out here in the Disney company's 100th year anniversary. And yeah, it very much is very notably calling back to kind of like and harkening back to early era of Disney, a la your Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, your Cinderella, your Sleeping Beauty, those kinds of classic fairy tales. It is a return to 2D animation. in a lot of ways, which obviously they've kind of moved more away from in, Moana, Tangled, Frozen, kind of the modern era. So that was like a nice, refreshing treat. And yes, there is a litany of Easter eggs throughout the film. And while some of them are like very much on the nose, I did appreciate how a lot of them were more subtle. I agree with you in that I didn't really think any of the songs were particularly like I left the theater thinking about them. But at the same time, that's only watching it once. I don't know how memorable even like the golden age of Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, how much I remembered those songs coming out of them the first time versus they were ingrained in my head because we played them on repeat when we watched the movie over and over and over again on VHS and stuff. So I could see this really resonating with kids in that regard. In the same way that most recently Encanto didn't do great box office stuff, but when it came to Disney Plus, everybody wouldn't shut up about we don't talk about Bruno. So yeah, I think there's ample opportunity for this to become kind of the classic that it is very much evoking and kind of playing with. And it'd be an interesting version of that because so much of it is subverting moments and ideas and stuff. And some of it was, given away in the marketing, which is pretty much just par for the course these days. But if you go in like not really knowing what this one's about, I think there's some fun twists and turns and surprises. Some wonderful like spectacle moments and yeah, for a lifelong Disney fan, there were a ton of like, oh, I get what that's supposed to be a reference to, or I like appreciating and just kind of like a smile on my face, in addition to like enjoying an otherwise, straightforward, like heartwarming tale kind of thing. And yeah, then again, we won't get into spoilers or anything, but like in the end credits, because this very much is like a celebration of like the lineage of Disney animation, they do play with like imagery from across the eras of Disney animated films, and they do it largely chronologically. So it was very fun for me, like watching and seeing. Okay, yep, there's easily like there's the Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs moment. There's the Robin Hood moment. There's Fox and the Hound. There's Little Mermaid, and seeing all of these like iconic imagery come up, and then getting to kind of like, oh, there's. I know that's Brother Bear. I know that's Home on the Range. I know that's Chicken Little, even though those are the movies that are in like my dark ages and that like when I was away from Disney.
Home on the Range, that's the name of the film I couldn't think of.
Yeah.
The one with Rosie O'Donnell plays the cow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I never saw that film.
Yeah. I know Disney well enough to know those movies, but I've never watched those movies. So like even there kind of just like going through the different eras in my mind and like predicting, okay, what's going to come next? What's going to be the next one? What image are they going to pull? What character are they going to pull in? Was just like a fun treat, even, through the end credits kind of thing. Yeah, I had a good time with it. I do like talking about it. Yeah, I honestly, like Wreck-It Ralph 2, in particular, Ralph Breaks the Internet, has probably more meta references and like Easter eggs and stuff like that than this does even. And that one goes even across like into Star Wars and Marvel. It like it breaks outside of the, and obviously, video games and all that stuff too. But this was still a delightful film in and of itself. And it is one that I'll be curious to like on a re-listen or a rewatch, like how much, and I think part of it will be for me watching it with closed captions, because there were definitely a lot of things.
Yeah.
And maybe it was just I had a bad audio mix kind of thing, but I found myself getting tripped up on a lot of like the fast dialogue of the lyrics of the songs. So I was having a hard time kind of like catching the particular references or subtleties or whatever was happening there. So when I'm actually able to see it alongside hearing it, will probably help ingrain it a little bit more for me.
I will say shout out to Chris Pine's performance though. He, while singing wasn't the strongest point of his performance, his dialogue and capturing kind of the Chris Pine charm completely successfully carried out through the animation and his voice acting. His voice acting perfectly carried through, felt constantly like, oh, he's turning on the charm. But also shout out to the movie for like when they're like, yeah, when somebody's bad, they've made bad decisions and they like, those are committed. Like you commit a bad decision, you don't like, there's no magical like redemption. It's like, you have to deal with the consequences of your actions.
In this particular case, it's like, oh, you've chosen to do forbidden evil magic. Well, that makes you bad forever. You can't like. There's no redeeming from that.
You've chosen to literally like destroy the thing that gives people hope in their lives that you were claiming that you were protecting.
But that's not what broke him.
Oh, that's true.
That's what I'm saying.
It's the opening the book and using it.
Yeah, it's using the evil magic is what makes him irredeemable, which already is like. I mean, he's from the jump. He's kind of like introduced as like a pretty questionably ethically moral bad guy.
Well, his song does say like, "I'm such a good guy, I don't even make you pay rent." Like, if you want to code somebody as being a villain for millennials, success right there. Somebody like
wait, a landlord that doesn't make you pay rent is a bad guy?
No. Gloating that he doesn't make them pay rent. Like
anyway. I would be perfectly fine with somebody gloating that they weren't making me pay rent if they didn't make me pay rent. I would not view that person as a villain.
I don't know if I'm conveying this correctly, so I'm just going to step back on that. I think there's like a bigger like moral equity question of
that's
property.
like the Benny thing we always talk about with Rent of like Benny was trying to be a good guy to his friends.
Oh, that's true. No, sorry. I'm coming out from the frame of reference of like not in like a modern capitalistic society that we live in, but rather if you're creating a utopia and you're like, man, I don't even make you pay. It's like, well, no, of course you don't make him pay rent. Like you don't own their property. Like you, and I think that's a bigger question of like,
he is the king of was it Moses? No, not Moses. Rosas. Yeah. So he's the king of the area. So especially, if we were talking
feudalistic
traditional
society.
feudalism,
that's true.
Of course, he would be charging them all taxes and rent and whatnot. Chris Pine is always a treasure and always a delight. And this is no different. Alan Tudyk as like one of the eponymous voice actors that are not eponymous.
Who was Alan Tudyk in this?
He's Valentino, the goat.
Oh my gosh, he was so good.
Yeah, he's basically doing his Clayface voice from Harley Quinn.
Never saw that.
Which is it's like, okay, this is a very weird voice to see coming out of an animated goat.
It's a baby goat too.
But yeah, he's fun as he always is when he pops up in these things. Ariana DeBose didn't do anything particularly of note for me, but I think that's more her character's kind of the like ingenue as Asha, kind of our lead character here. And obviously she was great in West Side Story a couple years ago. Probably what largely kind of put her on the path for this film. So she's like normally great. She just did nothing really of her performance stood out for me in this one. And really it was like Chris Pine was kind of the standout and Alan Tudyk's just like a notable voice. So yeah. Overall, yeah, I had a good time with it. It's I probably agree. It's like a mid-tier Disney thing, but it's still, a good Disney fun. And I very much look forward to hopping in once it's out for more mass consumption, diving into those like, here's all of the Easter eggs in Wish that you saw or didn't see kind of thing. So yeah. Any final thoughts on Wish before we move on?
Overall, I just think that's a solid film. Even if you're not a big Disney head, it's still a really good time. Even if you're gonna pick up on all the references. So still a solid movie. But I wouldn't if I'm not a massive Disney fan, or if you're not a massive Disney fan, I wouldn't suggest like running out to the theaters to see it.
Cool. So next up on the movie front still, Blue Beetle, which I sat down and watched on HBO Max, because I refuse to just call it Max because fuck David Zaslav. It's a dumbass branding thing. Blue Beetle is fine. It was better than The Flash. I will freely say that. But it is the quintessential like hero origin story. So if you've ever seen one of those, be it through a Spider-Man movie or an Iron Man or any number of the other superhero movies we've had in the last 20 years, this pretty much just hits all those beats. The things that this has going for it are Cholo Maraduena is very good and very fun. He's likable, and his whole family of characters around him, including what's his name? George Lopez playing Uncle Rudy. The whole Reyes family is a lot of fun, and brings a lot of like heart and levity to an otherwise paint by numbers superhero origin story. Susan Sarandon is very much just like over the top evil in this.
Awesome.
Like regularly just being like, let's just kill this guy and be done with it kind of stuff. And like no, and lots of like racial like stuff in there too. But yeah, the kind of the core family is like the saving grace of this movie. And the fact that it very much is trying to embrace the culture of the Reyes family and not just kind of like whitewash it or just kind of like, plant them into it. It's doing a lot of the same kind of like, the really cool things about like Black Panther are the cultural elements that it incorporates and those kinds of vibes. So same with like Shang-Chi, a lot of the Asian influences and stuff pulling into that. So but yeah, beyond that, like it's very like, Act 1 is like getting and dealing with the powers. Act 2 is like the struggle of those powers, and Act 3 is fighting a person who has the exact same powers as you, and figuring out how to live with your powers, kind of thing. So yeah, nothing crazy to write home about, but certainly a better at bat than The Flash was this year. But yeah, obviously no one really came out and saw this either. It did seem to be like the number one thing on HBO Max on Thursday, which is when I watched it, because it was they're at the top of the like top 10 things right now on HBO Max. So hopefully got some good eyes on it over this holiday weekend. But yeah, I was also very much like logging on to HBO Max and being like, is Barbie on here yet? No, sad. Oh well. But yeah, solid, fine. If you have HBO Max and you want to throw this on the background, you might have some fun with it. But if you don't, you're probably not missing too much. Any questions or anything before we hop over into the game corner?
Nope,
Cameron?
I'm good to hop in.
All right. Then dive into Like a Dragon Gaiden, The Man Who Erased His Name. Tell me about this one.
Yeah, so unfortunately, to explain anything, I do have to spoiler Yakuza 6.
I mean, yeah. All the Yakuza games are very much like, okay, here's the through line. I've not played Yakuza 6, but I got the gist of his story from Yakuza 6 when I played Yakuza 7 Like a Dragon, with a completely different character. So yes, yep. He is the eponymous man who erased his name.
Yep. So Kiryu now going by I think it's Toryu, which means hidden dragon, as part of like a Kiryu, I think, which means like raging dragon or something like that. But basically Toryu is like a code name for him, but he officially has no name or designation or identification, because he faked his death at the end of Yakuza 6 to essentially give a clean slate, because his existence was, and his actions in Yakuza 6, while done to protect people that he cared about and to protect, people at large, did put him kind of at an awkward position where he knew too much. And so he used the fact that he knew too much with the political elite that were trying to maybe silence him, and use that effort to essentially go underground. This game takes place during the events of Like a Dragon, Yakuza 7. So there's actually a lot of like motifs or references to like quests that are in that are actually in Like a Dragon. And so that's a lot of fun. Like you at one point help out some homeless people, and they mention the main character is healing from being shot, which is like the beginning of Like a Dragon. And so this takes place kind of simultaneously as you're going through it. So there's a lot of references to the to Yakuza 7. So it truly is a Gaiden, which of course means side story. And this is just kind of like where Kiryu was during those events.
Mm-hmm. He does pop up in Like a Dragon a little bit.
And this kind of explains how he got there and why he's there, and kind of like what he's doing. And what basically surrounding it is that Kiryu is kind of a pseudo secret agent. When they need, like, the game literally starts off with you doing a bodyguard for the head of the political party that is helping you out, that you have a somewhat adversarial relationship with, because even though they're helping you out, it's because you're blackmailing them, or Kiryu's blackmailing them. And so, but he's there doing a mission, taking care of the head of the chairman of that party's granddaughter. She's out with friends who came in when she was studying abroad in the Middle East. They went to a club, and she drank too much, and so she's leaving to go home, and Kiryu is helping her out, and she's accosted by some guys. And Kiryu, of course, does his patented, like, hey, you guys need to, like, back off. And they're like, shut it, old man, and try to attack him. And so he has to defend himself and the girl who they are basically threatening to assault. And Kiryu absolutely wipes the floor with them. And they're like, you know who my dad is? And the girl at that point had not so, she was more sick than she was drunk, but from drinking too much. But she kind of like sobers up a little bit and like basically name drops her grandfather and his dad, and basically like dismisses it that way. But like Kiryu was definitely there and helping her out, and so Kiryu was like gaining more trust within the party. And then it comes to a head where during a very like CIA secret agent sort of like handoff of like gold to freedom fighters in another country, facilitated by the CIA and this party in Japan to help out this like Central Asian like terrorists. Very CIA stuff going on with that. During that, Kiryu, like, it comes up like Kiryu didn't erase himself well enough. And that kind of comes to a head with other things, and it kind of like takes off from there, of where it's tied to both Kiryu and his decision to erase his name, also coming to clashing with the morality of the party that he's aligned himself with, coming to blows with, in regards to the life of one of their agents who Kiryu has developed a fondness for, and has decided that he's his only, now that he's erased his name, it's his only connection to anything that makes life worth living. And so he's gonna like save that guy's life. And that's kind of like where the game takes off. Overall, game's really good. It's like it's the best Yakuza combats I think ever been. It doesn't have the full range of styles that I've unlocked yet. You start off with kind of like this new hybrid of balanced / quick style from like the classic Yakuza games. Kind of his like fast-paced attack style and his more balanced attack style that has counters to it. It's more of an accuracy form, and that's now his like quote unquote secret agent. I think it's called Dokai is the form, named after the party that he's aligned with. And then later on, he's confronted by Yakuza, and you unlock his Yakuza form. And so you get back to the classic, like, just like strong, more slow, more charged up attacks, like classic Yakuza style fighting. And you can kind of mix up the styles as you want. The heat meter is back. And so like it's just pulling in the best systems from all the other Yakuza games and consolidating it like solidly here. It's a ton of fun to play. rather than doing like bonus points or anything like that, all of your abilities are unlocked by money, because there's really no other point for your money other than to like unlock skills, because there's no like, there's no side thing that you're trying to like build up or anything, at least that I found so far. And so everything is like investing money into points for upgrades. Super great. I'm having a blast with it. It's so much fun. And it's great to see like Kiryu. Like what is Kiryu's character? Who is Kiryu as a person when he's not Cosmo Kiryu? When he's not the Dragon of Dojima? What happens when he's not when he's not a Yakuza? Like, who is he as a person when he doesn't have these responsibilities like the orphanage and everything else? Who is he when he's just a person who has no obligations to anyone but himself and nothing but loyalty for himself? And where does that end up this character at this like very awkward point in his life where for once he's not living his life for anyone else other than himself, and he starts making decisions that are very typical for himself but also come with new consequences that you don't normally get to see in the other Yakuza games. And you deal with a lot more of like, you're dealing with like politically shitty people, and you're like that make the Yakuza seem like good guys sometimes. So it really brings into a lot of focus towards who Kiryu as a person is, rather than just what his past and his history is. And so story-wise, I've been really interested in that, in the way that they've kind of developed like and explored who Kiryu is as a person outside of the name. Like Soryu, like what does it mean for Toryu, this hidden dragon? What does it mean for this person who has no name, who erased his name? Who is he still as a person? And that's kind of what they explore with this game.
Cool. You said it's only like it's a short thing on the scale of like Yakuza Like a Dragon games. Yeah.
Even classic Yakuza games, I'd say this one seems to be pretty short. I'm only 2 chapters in, but it is like from what I understand, it's only 5 chapters, and none of those chapters are particularly long. So we're talking shorter than Yakuza Kiwami.
Does it still have like a bajillion goofy side things you can do?
Less than a bajillion. They're still in arcade, so you can still mess around in the arcade. I messed around with the Sonic Fighters. They put the Sonic like Fighter 3D fighter game from like the arcades back in the 90s and early 2000s in there, which is cool. Some racing games and some claw machine games and stuff like that. But other than that, like there doesn't seem to be too many things. Like I said, there's no like businesses to upgrade or anything like that that I've met so far. I believe there's an arena. I've heard mention of like an arena, but I don't know if that's going to be like classic Yakuza style arena or if it's just like part of a storyline is that you do an arena fight. I haven't gotten to that point yet, but it doesn't seem to be invested in telling and being like a full-length Yakuza game. I think that's why it's only like $40 on other places, but it's on Game Pass for free. So once again, Game Pass, best deal you're gonna find in gaming. Just pumping out great games to put on there and making my $12 a month worth it every single month. So Yakuza Like a Dragon Gaiden. The Man Who Erased.
There's no Yakuza anymore.
It's just Like a Dragon Gaiden. Okay, yeah, Like a Dragon Gaiden. The Man Who Erased His Name definitely gets a thumbs up for me. It's super good. So if you've missed the brawler beat 'em up style of the classic Yakuza games, this is definitely a love letter to you.
I mean, it's like it's in these. It's all like in that brawling style's also in the Judgment games, right?
Yes.
Yeah. It's only the Like a Dragon. The new Like a Dragon, which is going to also be like Infinite Wealth kind of thing, has made the jump to turn-based stuff.
I will say the accuracy form that kind of Kiryu uses is very much like the fighting style you get in Judgment versus the Yakuza fighting style. But then again, you also unlock the Yakuza fighting style as a stance, and so you can kind of stance switch and do your classic like dodge shuffle maneuvers as you like shuffle around the battlefield and beat people up and dodge moves. It's really great.
Yeah, maybe I should go back and hop back in and do Yakuza 3, 4, 5, and 6 at some point.
I think they're excellent. They're each individually really good.
Those are the
All in
ones
Game
that
Pass. So.
they didn't get the Kiwami treatment.
Yeah, they don't have the Kiwami
So
treatment.
all
So they're
like I have the remaster versions of them, but I also like I remember from Yakuza 0, I was like, "Oh, I miss the additions or the better improvements they put in the Kiwami games." So we'll see.
yep.
Um,
Yep,
cool.
there's a lot of stuff that I say. Yeah, those games are a bit. I feel like a bit more relic of their time, but overall still really great stars. Like solid story wise. Like the Yakuza story continues to be like this over dramatization of like telenovela levels of like over the topness, and it's absolutely great.
I mean, it's
continues
anime.
to-
It's
anime as fuck. Yeah,
yeah, it's and that's another thing. Like the reason I kind of got to the point where I was like, all right, I'm just gonna skip ahead to Like a Dragon was I don't love the combat as much in the more brawler ones. So the jump to turn-based, RPG style combat, I was like, this is more my jam in speed while still being, over the top, bombastic, flamboyant, and with that Yakuza charm. So, well, very cool. I look forward to hearing how the rest of that plays out. So we will jump over now into Horizon Forbidden West Burning Shores,
Yeah.
which roll back to like the beginning of the year in the lead up to this releasing. I replayed Horizon Forbidden West on my I replayed the PS4 version of the game for all those trophies and got the platinum. And that was largely like, I'm going to replay all of that so that I get the combat back in my hands for when Burning Shores comes out. And then Burning Shores came out, and I just was burnt out on on Horizon at the time. So it's been sitting there. I never uninstalled or anything, but this weekend I was like, yeah, I'm gonna finally circle back to that. And the first hour or so of playing, I was real bad, and I'd loaded up my original playthrough on PS5 because it's only on PS5, the expansion. And so I very quickly was like, oh, I'm real bad at this. I need to drop the difficulty down to story because I don't remember how to play this. I don't remember what my loadout, what my build was really like, min-maxed, built around any of that kind of stuff. So I just kind of dropped the difficulty down. And then once I did that, I had a good old time. So this takes you, if you're not familiar, and I guess there may be minor spoilers for like Horizon Forbidden West in this. But yeah, I won't dive into spoilers for this particular story, but you're kind of your big bad here. It kicks off. You get a message from Silence, the late great Lance Reddick, basically identifying and indicating that of the zeniths that you took out at the end of the main game, one of them is unaccounted for. One of them has disappeared, and Silence believes he's gone off to Los Angeles. So you head down to what was once Los Angeles is now known as the Burning Shores, because lava and earthquakes have kind of like riddled a volcano and earthquakes
cool.
have riddled the land. So yeah, there's lots of like little pools of lava kind of dipping down the Hollywood sign and stuff like that. So the character that you are kind of tracking down there is a zenith named Walter Landra. So he is among the zeniths that were had returned to Earth in the main game, and his whole deal was like back in the before times. He was like a tech billionaire who made the bulk of his money in like aerospace, sending ships out to mine nearby asteroids and stuff like that, and bring all that wealth and minerals back to Earth. And so he made billions upon billions there. But he was also, in the LA Hollywood scene. His partner was the head of the Pangea Hollow series. That's basically like a Jurassic Park, Jurassic World kind of ripoff
That's
kind
cool.
of thing. And one of the locations that exists in this version of LA is Pangea Park. That's basically like, hey, here's your, like, we don't have Disney, we don't have Universal Studios, but here's the theme park, in this culture. And so you kind of go over there, and there's lots of dinosaur holograms and stuff like that, and a lot of your characters are referencing the fact that these look like claw striders and the robots that you're used to seeing and stuff like that. Weird. Along the journey, Aloy encounters a new character, Seika, who is a Quen in this part of the world, and effectively like so in the main game, one of your side characters was Alva, who was part of the Quen tribe there.
Mm-hmm. One of my favorite parts of Forbidden West.
Yeah. So Seika is part of the other half of that expedition. They got separated in the storms that like brought them to California, basically. And so some of them, Alva's group ended up in San Francisco, and Seika's group here ended up in LA, and they've kind of so as Aloy, you're there, you kind of like get to bridge the gap between the two. You kind of get to let this person know, hey, your other people are still around. Yay.
You aren't the only survivors of your expedition.
Yeah. So that's a cool little like, here's who, and that ends up very much being kind of their I think in the main game, like that tribe is called like Landfall. In this, it's like they're much bleaker, and it's like Journey's End or something. Like it's like they definitely thought they were screwed when they landed there. And
so Aloy letting them know, hey, you're all right.
Well, she kind of keeps that close to the vest for the broader group, but like your one companion who's really kind of like on this expansion with you, she eventually kind of lets that person down. It's a fun little side story. It's probably 10-15 hours, probably akin to like a Dragon Gaiden. Your big bad here, Walter Landra, has his plan, because he knows what's coming from the big bad kind of set up at the end of the second game, and what will inevitably be the kind of core point of the third game. He's very much here trying to get his resources and get what he can from the past, to get himself and like a little cult community that he's kind of building a quick path off the planet. But if he tries to leave, the tech isn't great. It's going to poison the land, all the people around it, kind of stuff. So Aloy basically sets out to stop him. And Seika has kind of a personal connection as to why she wants to kind of weigh in on this as well. There's a couple new robot types, notably a bile gut, which is basically like a frog creature, like a much more frog that also can lay eggs, and the eggs will kind of like spawn little, I guess, more flies than like tadpoles or whatever. But like there are little egg robots that will electric burst, and suddenly a little very easy to kill flying gnat is kind of swarming at you. And then there's a few new kind of collectible things that you can kind of seek out on the map, including like the collectible figurines of Pangea, the Hollow series and stuff like that. There's like 5 of those that you can kind of go around and find. They take the vistas from the kind of main game, and kind of create a new variation on that is more flight based. because a lot of what you're going to be doing in this one is going to be flying around on a sunwing, or
Okay.
there is another new creature that is a water wing that can not only fly but can also dive into the water.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, that's a cool new way of traversal. And the game also, like, when you come into the Burning Shores, kind of the big bad has set up like this, ominous tower that is shooting down anything that comes nearby or shooting any ships that come nearby. So it does kind of take away some of your toys and stuff from that you kind of have to like build back those kinds of abilities here in this new area. But yeah, it's a cool little thing. A few side quests here and there as well across the area. I've pretty much done everything of note to do in the Burning Shores, and yeah, it probably took me 15 hours maybe to 100% everything that was in there over the last few days. Cool little story. Walter Landra, played by Sam Witwer, as your kind of big bad, which was weird because like the first half of the story where you're interacting with him, you're only experiencing him through like holograms and stuff like that. And just based on like the quality of that, I didn't catch that it was Sam Witwer until the first time I actually saw him like in person in the in the flesh, so to speak.
And it's very Sam Witwer.
And it was like, that looks like Sam Witwer, but with like a like not a 70s mustache, I guess, kind of thing is kind of what he had going on. And like, I don't know what kind of hair to describe it, but it didn't look like Sam Witwer's like normally buzz cut kind of hair kind of thing. So like,
gotcha, yeah.
It was like, that looks like Sam Witwer. It doesn't sound extremely Sam Witwer-y, but good for him. He's just doing voices.
Yeah.
But I looked it up and confirmed, yes, it was him, and I was like, that makes sense given the likeness. But yeah, it was notably the mustache. I was like, I've never seen Sam Witwer with that kind of a mustache.
He's not really known for having a lot of facial hair. So.
Yeah, exactly. Or if he is, it's like the scruff of a Star Killer or something like that. But yeah, he's fun in the role that he's here for. It's nice seeing him kind of pop up. And of note, I will say Kylie Lila Page, who is Seika, as kind of your new companion in this adventure. She's a lot of fun as well. And then there isn't a ton of Silence, but you get him kind of introducing the thing, and then there's kind of like a little epilogue wrap up with him. And the scenes between him and Aloy are great, and just kind of are like, oh, it's sad that Lance Reddick's obviously not going to be here to reprise the role anymore. But overall, fun little adventure. I feel like it felt smaller to me than the Frozen Wilds of the first game. But maybe that's just like in terms of like things to do, or maybe it's just because because so much of this DLC is, hey, you can be just kind of like flying from island to island, or kind of, or also fast traveling from point to point, stuff like that. So there was probably a lot of like, oh, I'm flying over, dinos on the ground that I could be fighting and grabbing from parts and stuff like that. But I just didn't really, especially playing on easy mode, I didn't feel a need to do a whole bunch of grinding for robo parts and stuff like that. But yeah, overall, it was a fun, good time. Glad I circled back around to it. I'll be curious to see, much like I feel like very little of Frozen Wilds impacted or made its way into, like, there were a couple references to it across Forbidden West. Whereas, like, depending on how you play, especially your relationship with Seika here, that could drastically, be a different kind of role in terms of how that kind of plays out or can play out in a Horizon 3, while at the same time the game kind of gives itself an out in terms of like, hey, both of these characters have things to do, so maybe she won't pop up in the third game. And that'd be like, if I hope they don't go that route. I hope she's a great character, fun addition to the cast and crew, and also gives a good, interesting new dynamic for Aloy to play with. So I'll be sad if they don't bring her back. But the game does very much kind of give itself an out to not for people that, don't end up playing this stuff come Horizon 3. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. But yeah, so I think that's all I really had for that. If you have Burning Shores and never checked it out, definitely go for it. Otherwise, pick it up if it's on sale and any kind of thing. And if you're clamoring for more Horizon, so yeah. Any questions or anything? Because this was one you were interested in.
Yeah, I think you've actually answered all of them. I'm like, yeah, well, like Burning Shores, like where is it exactly? I know it's supposed to be like Los Angeles. What does that kind of look like though? And you kind of painted a full picture of that. Mm-hmm. The idea that you're kind of like going island to island has been taken over. Because Burning Shores for me, I was like, is it like it's on fire? And it's like, no, it is, but it's like lava. Mm-hmm. And it's more of like the topography is like shifted to being more volcanic.
Yeah.
Which makes sense because it's like it's on the San Andreas fault line. And what does that look like, 10,000 years in the future after the planet's been like virtually like massively changed in massive ways?
I mean, it's only 1,000 or
1,000 years. Sorry, did I say 10,000? Yeah, my bad. It's like 1,000 years in the future. Like, what kind of changes in the San Andreas fault line would that look like? And it's like volcanic. Makes sense. Yep. It's very cool. I think that's really cool. I feel like my only hesitation's always been like I'm so outside of playing Horizon. I don't know if I'm like I could make that like a quick pickup to be like back into it.
Yeah, it is very much like, it's a trippy kind of thing. Oh, there are a couple. So one of the things they increase the level cap, so you go from 50 to 60, and nice. They add new like abilities in kind of each of the little 6 quadrants that you can kind of power up, including extra like ults or whatever, the ultimate abilities kind of thing. A couple of the cool ones that they give you are there's a new weapon that you pick up over the course of the thing that is effectively like the Zenith tech. So you get like kind of a gauntlet that can shoot like the same kind of stuff that cool, like the stalkers or whatever, not stalkers, the stealthy Zenith creatures. So you pick up something that can do that, and one of the abilities you get is it's basically just a glove, so you're not using a bow and arrow or anything like that. So you can use the glide and you can shoot with that without breaking your glide. So you can kind of like slowly kind of glide down and shoot robots or people or whatever. So that's a cool new kind of feature. But yeah, like I said, it took a little bit of like getting back into the flow of things to even just get a sense of that stuff. And then from there I was like, I'm still like one of the first side quests I did, I was just getting my ass handed to me. So I was like, all right, I'm going to drop down from normal to story mode and just like calm this the hell down. So yeah. Cause yeah, I remember doing that same thing with like Frozen Wilds and like jumping back into that, and in both cases, I guess Frozen Wilds isn't like post game content. This is very much like this won't unlock until you've beaten the main game. And so it's very much designed for, somebody who's put in 30 plus hours of Horizon Forbidden West. And when it's been 8 months since you did that, it's a little tricky to kind of shake off the rust there. So, yeah. But fun nonetheless. And also gorgeous, beautiful game. Continue to look forward to seeing what they do with Horizon 3 when the time comes. So yeah. Let's hop over now back into TV land. So both of us watched Invincible Season 2, the first 4 episodes that are out before they because now they're on like a hiatus until Season 2 Part 2 comes out sometime next year. And we also did Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. And again, these are both going to be a little bit more spoiler filled. So you have been warned. But yeah, Cam, let's talk into Invincible Season 2 first.
Sure.
What'd you think of this one?
I mean, I really enjoyed it. It took me a minute to get used to the animation style again. A bit of a shift up after watching so much anime, as I pointed out to you before when we talked.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, I'm really loving it. Invincible's still one of the best comic books of all time, and so like you have the omnibus right behind you. It's still like one of the best stories in Western media, in my opinion. And it tells a superhero story that takes a lot of motifs and things that we know and then turns them on their head in a unique and individual way, and in a way that really harkens to a balance between optimism and pessimism and narcissism, I think, in a lot of ways. That it tells stories about people who have superpowers rather than about superpowered people, I guess is the best way to put it. And then you have a few characters who are superpowered people, and what does it mean when they live their lives among people who don't have superpowers, and what does an impact that those people make on those lives? It's really easy to kind of get lost in the story of like all these superpowered people, but there's so many times that Invincible Robert Kirkman regrounds the series in a way that makes it really more about the people themselves rather than the powers and abilities. The way in which season 2 starts off with is after the massive season 1 fight between Omni-Man and Invincible, where the classic like get it through your head Mark meme moment, voiced by the impeccable and one of the greatest voice actors of all time and actors of all time, J.K. Simmons, doing Omni-Man, is just impeccable in that end of season 1, where he is just going off about like, your mom, like, I love your mom, but she's like, we live a long time, Mark. She's more like a pet. Like, these very big, impactful moments in season 1 carry over very strongly into season 2, because this isn't a year plus removed from it for these characters. This was a month.
Mm-hmm. I think what's so fun about how this second season starts off is, especially if you've read the series, you kind of like see where it's going, because it starts in one of the alternate universes where we see like an Angstrom Levy from another timeline where Invincible and Omni-Man didn't fight, and Invincible sided with Omni-Man, and they've taken over the planet. And it's very much like if you're unfamiliar with the comic, you're going to come into this and be like, wait, what?
Yeah,
like,
it's a great fake out.
Did I thought things ended very differently here. How do we get to this point? And it's so one of the things that like I've found myself really appreciating over the course of this second season so far is just how, especially in light of the current superhero conversation and stuff, like the idea of the multiverse obviously is well-worn territory now. And so the idea that, and I looked it up, like Robert Kirkman was playing with Angstrom Levy introduced back in 2004 into Invincible, and like that kind of idea, almost 20 years ago, just kind of like, he played with so many Invincible things that were, not necessarily ahead of their time, because multiverses had been a thing in comics for a long time and all that stuff.
I mean, the 80s literally had the Crisis on Multiple Earths.
Yeah, but it's like how well timed it ends up being with kind of the current modern conversation and stuff like that.
The modern conversation around multiverses multiverses used to be such a niche thing for nerds and comic books in particular, to then branch off into it being like multiverse is now a mainstream media like lay term that they use is bonkers for people who have been around as long as we have, and for those who've been around longer who remember what it was like trying to explain multiverses to friends and family members back in the 80s when it was when the concept was kind of first being like burgeoned out in comic books, which really was one of the first ever literary devices to take on multiverses. I think Robert Kirkman absolutely nails like a way to use multiverses without multiverses being overburdensome. I think he strikes a perfect balance of these things do exist, and in their own way they do matter, but they don't matter to our main story as much. Like, it matters to certain aspects of it, like we see later in the first episode, but the actual, like, to our main character, the fact that there's other Invincibles is not going to impact his story. It is added dressing and it is added flavor to the greater universe as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
And it enriches the universe that Invincible takes place in.
Yeah, I think, and that's the other thing that, like, after the first season, I went back and like reread all of all of Invincible, because it's just so good. And what I love, what season 1 did, and what season 2 has also done, is very much like it still embraces all of Invincible, and so you do get like a little throwaway, reference to a character, or a little scene will pop up, and it's like, oh, I'm like, who are those characters? I'm interested in them, and it doesn't like we're not focused on their story yet. You don't need to know about them yet, but they're there. They've been introduced. They exist in this world. So when they come back in 4 episodes time or something like that, and are playing a little bit more of a role, I think there's going to be a lot of like. There's constantly like seeds being planted that I know are going to pay off, because I know how the overarching story of the whole thing goes, and I just love getting to see that in another kind of medium, with great performances. Yeah, like Sterling K. Brown is a wonderful Angstrom Levy, unsurprisingly great voice, great performer, and I very much look forward to seeing more of this story play out, because we've only really gotten like the beginning seeds of it, and he's going to end up being such a pivotal character in Mark's story that I love, that we've got somebody of that caliber kind of playing that role and being a part of it.
Absolutely. Also, a massive shout out to Stephen Ewan as Mark. He continues to carry this emotional appeal that prevents Mark from being too whiny. When a lot of times in the comic book, it can read Mark as being a little whiny at certain points, or being a little like petulant. It never feels that way with Stephen Ewan's performance. Stephen Ewan always plays it with such nuance and like gravitas to it that it makes sense that, yeah, like, okay, it's like, I think the big thing is the reunion with Omni-Man is a lot of that. If you read it, just like quick paced fast through, it's like Mark is just causing obstacles and being like, but why? Like, no, I refuse, like all this stuff. And the way that they do it so well in the actual, I almost said live action, but in the animation and in the storytelling with the voice acting, is they have it perfectly paced so that it feels like, the wheels are churning in Mark's head. Stephen Ewan is bringing a depth to every time Mark is saying no. It's not just like a no, period. It is a thought, beat, no, or like he does such a great job of like taking those into sequence to the point where by the time he does agree, it does feel like there has been progress being made throughout it. It's not just all of a sudden shift in opinion. Mm-hmm. Once again, Invincible doing what it does best, which is it sets up this thing and it's like, but we still have a couple of weeks, and then cut. Nope, it's happening right now. Classic Robert Kirkman of like throwing you off as far as like time goes and how you think time is going to be spent, and doing what I think he does best, which is he loves throwing his characters into situations that if they were prepared for, they could handle. But that's not interesting. What's interesting is how do your characters handle things that they're not prepared for. And that's one of the reasons why The Walking Dead was always as good as it was in comic books. And that's one of the reasons why Invincible is always as good as it is, because he doesn't ever take the traditional trope of, we got to prepare. It's like, we have to prepare. Crap, they're here. And the way that he does that, I think, is just masterful. And I think that continues in the show running that he does for this. The way that they kind of like cut, pasted, and rebalance things in season 1, I think they've carried over well into season 2. There's a lot of extra stuff that could be cut as well, but they understand the emotional impact of it. Why have Mark go to college, do that entire college setup with Amber and his friends and everything, if he's just going to go off to space in an episode or two? Because it sets the actual grounding of Mark's character and why this is such a big jump for him to be going on an interstellar journey. It's really smartly done. And I was reading online, people were like, I don't know, like, what's the point of all this college stuff that didn't matter? And it's like, well, it does matter, because this is what Mark's real life actually looks like. And this is what his real life should look like. And these things that are pulling him away are going to set up the bigger dichotomy of like Invincible versus Mark Grayson. Like, where does that balance lie? Mm-hmm. constantly amazing performances. I forgot her name. She plays Mark's mom.
Melissa or Sandra Oh.
Sandra Oh kills it. Absolutely kills it this season, bringing in the balance of this character. Like, I don't know how I'm supposed to react when everything I knew for the last 20 years is a lie. I need to keep things together for my son, but my son's leaving, so I'm dealing with empty nesting. The public believes my husband's dead, but I can't, like, emotionally and morally, I can't mourn him because, one, I know he's not dead, but two, also I know he's a monster and he's a mass murderer. It's great. I love the continued like breakdown of Omni-Man as a Viltrumite, dealing with the like emotions he's adopted via osmosis from being around humans, and from when it brilliantly starts off with him when they start off with like what's happened to Omni-Man. It's him flying off, and we see him slowly get worse and worse and worse because like we learn later, he's abandoned his post. That's never happened before. He's let people live, otherwise that he should have killed. He's never done that before. All these things that have never supposed to have been happening before that Nolan is now doing. And it gets to the point where he is now begraddled, like, or what's the word I'm looking for? Whatever. He looks gross. He's been in space for weeks. He looks gross, and I mean, like we see him at one point, you know, contemplating and very seriously ready to fly into a black hole. He's drifting into a black hole and it's funny because the thing that stops him and saves him is being a hero.
Yeah.
And he's lost everything, but he can still make a difference. And it's like the thing that he learned on Earth that his wife taught him, and that like his son was constantly trying to remind him, is being a conqueror is one thing, but being a hero to these people is way more important. And him trying to like cut the balance at his new world and everything is great. It was great in the comics. It's great here. But it's like Omni-Man is like, he was broken down because he's broken all the rules. Yeah. He broke all the rules because he loves his son, and he like, when you're a Viltrumite, how do you balance love and care? And it's like, you can't. And so he books it and leaves. And I'll never forget end of season 1, him flying away and the tears evaporating in the atmosphere as he's flying out. And just continuing through this entire journey set to whatever that song was that is like, da, 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 just so depressing and just so emotive, of just like this like contemplation of like, I am going to kill myself. The only way for me to die is to be torn apart by a black hole. So I'm going to fall into a black hole, but then he saves people. And he is asked to be their emperor, and he's like,
yeah. If anything, like, I guess like my only, and this is like the slightest of gripes, but my only gripe would be that like it feels like so little time has passed because it's only been a few episodes.
True.
Compared to like
in the
comics, it was, and admittedly, it's also been, you know, actually a longer time production wise, because in the comics it was he flies away April 2004 in Invincible issue 12, and we see him again in Invincible 26 September 2005. So it was a year and a half in like monthly comics.
Yep.
And it's been a couple years since, you know, the first season, animated wise, but it's only been 4 episodes. So it feels like we got back to him so quickly.
Granted, they do mention in the episodes that it's been, but it's still like Mark's whole thing. You've been gone a month, and it's like, yeah, no, it's only been a month.
No, it's been like 6 months.
Oh, was it 6 months?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I believe you.
I mean, because there was a lot of time where like he was getting better and rehabbing and stuff before the beginning of this season, basically.
That's right, because like Nolan literally knocked all of his teeth out.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do? Knock my teeth out again? Just like the perfect way that like an abused child speaks to their abuser, who's now fully remorseful of all that abuse, is so like, there's so much like vindication in Mark, like basically like, you showed me that you're a big, strong monster. So make me stay by being a big, strong monster. Like be the monster that I know you are. And Nolan, instead of taking that and getting angry like a Viltrumite will, takes it like a human father does, which is shameful and remorseful. And it's like, there's so many great things that they're doing with this character that like Robert Kirkman continues to do with this character in this retelling that is so great. I freaking love Invincible so much. And if people, like, you ask me, you're like, how do you feel? Like when I was making dinner the other night, you're like, how do you feel about them like doing like 4 episodes now, taking a break for like, 4 or 5 months and then bringing the rest of the season out? And I'm like, one, if it makes it easier for animators, great. Two, if it's like, if that's what we need so we don't get another like 2-year wait between seasons, then yeah, I'll accept it. Like, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like once the next few episodes are out, it will be a long wait again for season 3. But yeah, hopefully they'll get a more quick paced or less turnaround time in between everything.
Like, listen, if you got to have 4 episodes come out every like 8 months at a time, I'm cool with that.
Yeah.
Do you want to do that? Like, that's fine.
But yeah, like the sad thing is, like, I want it all done now. I want the whole thing done so I can just so I don't have to go back and like reread the thing again. I can just enjoy it all and and see who they're gonna bring in to voice such and such a character and all these other things.
It's very exciting. We're at a very exciting time where I think Invincible's peak superhero media, and the only unfortunate thing is people might not give it a shot because it's animated.
Yeah.
And that's sad because it's the best. It makes the comic book feel, and that's another thing I'll address. But for people who talk about the animation in it
is also like it's hitting at a time that there is a lot of superhero fatigue. And
absolutely,
stuff.
Yeah.
And it is, again, it's building on something that like we know has been out there for 20 years, but people who've been watching The Boys and are seeing a very similar kind of like, oh, this is a gritty, real life kind of, edgy take on the superhero story. It's like, yeah. And The Boys also was ahead of its time, the graphic novel stuff.
I mean, yeah, the graphic novel stuff was a lot of like, Garth Ennis is a very much a counterculture writer. And so a lot of The Boys is left over from, like, we get it modernly now, but back in the day, it was about talking about post 9/11. Like, surveillance state and corporate powers and it was like a lot of the nuance of The Boys comic book was kind of like derailed by the 2008 recession, causing a massive hit kind of like to the economy and everything else that kind of like threw it out. But I think we're back to it now. So
we don't need to dive down
into
the rabbit hole of The Boys.
Yeah, we're good.
It was more just, I'm bringing it up as it's reference another point, thing. Yeah. Also on Amazon as well, that is like edgy, gritty superhero, take in that feels much more in response to the MCUification of things and the DC universe and all that stuff.
Yeah. If you think Homelander's like massacre and stuff is bad, it's got nothing on Omni-Man.
Yeah.
Omni-Man, when he in what it was at episode like 4 of the first season, he goes on a tear through the like alternate planet or like alternative dimension where those things are from, and he like decimates their entire civilization. Mm-hmm. So good.
Yeah. Any final thoughts on Invincible Season 2 Part 1 before we move over to Scott Pilgrim Takes Off?
Massive 2 thumbs up. Watch it.
Yeah. It's real good. It's one of those, like, I admittedly, like, in talking about, like, what are we going to talk about in this episode? I was like, I can talk about Invincible Season 2, but it's largely going to be like, I really like Invincible. It's real good. I don't have a ton more to say beyond that. I like people and you as well, like, talk about like, oh, the animation isn't that great. I'm like, oh no, what the hell are you talking about? The animation is like pitch perfect to the comic book, to the source material and stuff. It's great.
Yeah, no. And I was about to say that is like, I saw people complaining about it online, and after talking to you, I was like, I'm a bit thrown off by the animation, and you're like, well, you've been watching a shit ton of anime.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's fair. And like, to the point when I mentioned earlier, like I was a bit off put by the animation, but the truth is the animation is true to the comic book. Mm-hmm. It is truly the best example of like a comic book come to life, I think. Or like come to animation, like a 1-to-1 transition that you're going to find. And for people like, well, background this, background that, I was like, have you seen comic books?
Yeah.
It's about a lens of focus and like the distortion of being out of focus.
If you're focused that much on the background, then something about the foreground isn't grabbing you, and I think you've got a bigger issue.
Yeah.
Or you're looking for, things to nitpick on this.
People are like, and I think what somebody will point out, they're like, in season 1, there's one scene where it's literally a JPEG getting moved across, and like being somebody doing a screen recording of a JPEG being moved across, and they're like, we had moments like that in season 1, and like season 2 infinitely better. And it's like, okay, like, so like the rougher moments in animation are still look good. They still look good, so who cares?
Speaking about other animation, let's dive into Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. What do you think of this one? And this one, again, will be very spoiler. We watched the entire season, and we're going to chat about it. So, what did you think of Scott Pilgrim Takes Off?
I freaking loved it. Science Saru is the one who did the animation for it. They're the anime studio who did the whole thing, and they are... they cut their teeth. One of the first things they ever did was actually Star Wars Visions. They did one of the episodes for it. I believe it was the... I'm trying to remember which one it was. It was the... I'm just going to look this up real quick.
Or you can talk about other things.
Other things.
I'll look it up. So you're not... let's not do dead air.
T0B1.
Toby. Yeah.
Toby, yeah. Toby, they did that one.
The Mega Man one.
The Mega Man / Smash Robot Boy. I forgot what the Robot Boy is in. It's a Japanese animated thing. It's massively popular. But anyway.
Astro Boy.
Astro Boy, yeah. It's the Astro Boy Mega Man pseudo-inspired Star Wars story that was in Star Wars Visions. Studio Saru, if you were to try to compare the two products, vastly different. They're such an incredible animated studio. Scott Pilgrim Takes Off is a retelling, of course, of Scott Pilgrim versus the World. Whether it's the movie or the comic book, both of them are like visual retellings. You're going to pull out that you have like the massive box set behind you, right?
Yes.
Yeah. They do Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Scott Pilgrim's Precious Little Life.
Yeah, Precious Little Life. They do such an amazing job of adapting this in a brand new way. Scott Pilgrim Takes Off literally at the end of the first episode. He leaves the story.
Yeah, I mean that's the obviously the big spoiler thing is this a lot of the like pre-release stuff was very much pitched on like, hey, we've brought everybody from the movie back. And we're making the movie, but in animated form, so we can flesh things out. We can kind of tell more of that story kind of thing.
And it was a lie.
And yeah, the first episode ends, and
Matthew
Patel wins the fight, and Scott Pilgrim is gone, and then the series goes on to much more of a let's look at the story of these characters from Ramona's perspective, and let's let her have kind of the growth and the character development that maybe she didn't necessarily have in the original story.
It's from her perspective as well as from the perspective of the 7 evil. Who are the 7 evil X's if they're not being the evil X's?
Yeah.
And what does their story look like in a Scott Pilgrim's world? And the way they do it is fantastic. It's so good. I am in love with the storytelling that they did for this. They're like, Ramona, why are you after Scott? You guys kind of only went on like one kind of date. Like it wasn't even a real full date. But for Ramona, it was special, and there were sparks. The use of the way that they do everything, which by the way, massive shout out to the United States of Whatever being used in, I think it's episode 2.
The Lucas Lee
stuff. We got to capture what does like skater culture in America look like. And it's like to the United States of Whatever, it's all this stuff happening, and him being like a whatever is just, it's pitch perfect, absolutely amazing on every single level. I freaking love Lucas Lee. He's so good. Chris Evans is so good. Mm-hmm. Also shout out to like Scott Pilgrim versus the World being kind of like a springboard for so many different people to like all of them coming back. It's a big freaking deal.
Just what an all-star cast that was when it first released.
And nobody knew because they were like, it's the kid from Arrested Development and the girl from Sky High. And like and everyone else was like, whatever.
Yeah.
Like
it's pre Captain America Chris Evans, it's pre Superman Brandon Routh, it's pre Captain Marvel Brie Larson.
I'm pretty sure it's not pre Superman Brandon Routh, is it?
I don't think he'd been in Superman Returns yet.
Yeah, Superman Returns came out when I was in high school.
Maybe, but I feel like it was before he did that stuff. There's another thing we don't need to kill time looking up.
2006 film. So yeah. But to note, Superman Returns was not received well, and he never got to be Superman again. So he was kind of like on the out on his career, I guess, at this point.
Okay.
Before his return in Green Arrow and kind of his resurgence.
I mean, I remember him in Chuck. He's a lot of fun in there.
Yep.
And then and he has he came back in the Flash CW verse to reprise Superman and stuff. But so I guess he was probably maybe the most established of the
without a doubt
the cast here.
Chris Evans had been in the bad Fantastic Four movies, but that's about it for his career at that point.
And he'd also been in Not Another Teen Movie.
That's right.
Yeah.
So he was absolute all-star cast, especially from the gals in the cast. Brie Larson, Mae
Whitman, Mary Elizabeth Winstead.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, it's again, the whole cast is a banger cast.
Absolutely. Kieran Culkin, who kind of had a late massive breakout with Succession.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah. Here he was very much still that's Macaulay Culkin's kid brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is, but it's an absolute all-star cast. They reprise their roles perfectly. To the point where it's I don't know if necessarily this is quote unquote good voice acting, but it's the characters. So it's accurate to the characters. And that's the only negative thing I think I could say. But even then it's I wouldn't want them to be doing different voice acting because then that wouldn't be the same characters. Mm-hmm. Lucas Lee is a bit rough at points, and so is Todd as well. They're both a bit rough on the voice acting, but other than that, it's because they're conveying their characters appropriately. Yeah, and so
I mean, I had no problems with any of the performances in here.
Like I said,
they're all good. They're doing these characters
exactly
as they portrayed them
in the film
15 years ago.
Yep. It's so crazy that it went from comic book or graphic novel to film and now animated series, and they're all vastly different stories.
The first episode ended and I said to you, I was like, oh, this is really cool. They're Final Fantasy remaking it.
Yeah, that's right. You did.
It's that I love that that's kind of a genre we can get now in terms of okay, we're not just going to give you the same nostalgic thing. Even Cobra Kai is this to some degree. Here, we're going to take an established thing, but we're going to spin it. We're going to give you a new perspective on it. We're going to tell the story in a different way. We're going to change a thing and see how that sends the story off in a different way. But I also like that they set that version of the movie within this, and young Neil writes an autobiography later on that future Ramona ends up coming back in time and writing as Scott Pilgrim versus the World. That movie in this version never sees the light of day, kind of thing, and gets and struggles for production stuff. But it's cool seeing that that's the in-universe dynamic that they're setting with it.
Totally. And not only that, but also, you and I watched the first three episodes together. Mm-hmm. And originally I was just going to sit down and because I was eating, I was I'm just going to watch the first episode. Do you want to sit down? You're yeah, sure. And we watched it. And then I was next episode, didn't even check with you. You're just next one. And we finished the first three together, and it was just fantastic. It was so good. I just had such a blast with it. It is so much fun. It's also great to see characters still end up where they end up. Mm-hmm. Because Scott, he doesn't have this long journey of fighting the evil X's. He sees kind of oh yeah, by the way, fighting evil X's wasn't good for us. And then at the very end of that being well, screw you. I still want to be with Ramona. I still want to give this a shot. But he learns throughout his journey through time travel.
Through time travel and VR of a virtual boy.
Yeah, and going through and seeing Ramona's story through the virtual boy kind of VR time travel eyes of the robot. Mm-hmm. Seeing that and all of that helps him grow as a person even then. Yeah. And to the point where he's he sees kind of the narcissistic person he ends up being is I don't want to be that way. And the first thing he does when he gets back is he apologizes to Knives saying, hey, yeah, there's somebody else, but also it really wasn't cool for me to be dating a high schooler. And telling her that like she deserves better, and like giving her that closure, even though like she's kind of like worked. Knives gets her own journey through this story, and so it's kind of like, if he's not there to be the center of the world and the focus, how do these characters move through things? Shout out to Wallace continuing to be one of the greatest characters in fiction. I fucking love Wallace so much. He's so fucking good. He just continued like, what you mean I can be me and get paid for it? Yeah, I'm gonna do it. And then just seducing, like, I'm like, I wonder if they're gonna have the thing where Wallace seduces straight guys in this, or like quote unquote straight guys in this, and sure enough, seduces the hell out of Todd, and is just like, oh, don't worry, Envy, I got this. Todd, it was just a on-set fling. Mm-hmm. What? After the movie ends, so does the relationship. And Todd just having a breakdown over that. Mm-hmm. And growing as a person.
Yeah. And even Wallace growing as a person, and future Wallace, being in a nice relationship with somebody who works at the Nintendo.
Does that mean you get all the games for free? Yeah, it does. No, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
Also, shout out to Will Forte as future Scott.
Yeah, Will Forte, love him popping up, and is a perfect version of that future Scott,
of schlubby future Scott. Shout out to the twins for them showing up and Scott be like, we're gonna fight, and they're like, what? Oh no, our robot says that we're buddies in the future, so like, let's be buddies now. Yeah. And I'm like, great. Also shout out to their weird ass music video, which is so fucking good. Yeah. It's so fucking good, and it's supposed to be trashy and bad, and it's so good anyways.
100 views on YouTube. 105.
Yeah, 1,005. No, 105. No, you're right. It's 105. Yeah.
And you got to imagine most of those are future Scott.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Also, shout out to like the garage being all of Wallace's old stuff, mm-hmm. and then we see old Wallace, and he says, "By the way, white hair looks really good on you." Oh, thanks. Like, great moments where it's like young Scott showing that there is like an endearing good side to him, and encountering his narcissistic loser older self makes strong decisions about what he's going to do in his future. And massive shout out to them. Also, Sex Bob-omb's adding knives on keyboard. Excellent choice. Great evolution of all these characters and their stories, and telling a unique way of doing it, the same way the film did, and like set itself apart from the graphic novel in the same way. It just continues to be just absolutely spectacular in the way it does it.
Yeah. This is another one, like, lots of fun. I love that. Yeah, it's a reinterpretation of the story. Brian Lee O'Malley gets to basically do another version of Scott Pilgrim.
Gives a lot of love to characters who otherwise were kind of shafted by the early story stuff.
Yeah, if anything, I like the twins are one who I think they get shafted in the movie. They get shafted here again too, and so much so that they're the only ones of the original cast that didn't come back, because there wasn't anything really of note of them from the original movie, let alone
they didn't have any dialogue in the original movie.
I mean, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Like, yeah.
So yeah, like that still feels like a very, well, you just wanted to have 7 evil X's, so you threw in a couple, placeholders that never moved beyond placeholder. But I really did like that. A lot of this is Ramona realizing it's especially interesting to see this having just played Thirsty Suitors, where there is like Thirsty Suitors is very much like about the girl's kind of examination of her, past and the mistakes she made with her exes and stuff like that. And so kind of getting that here with Ramona too, it's just a good month for that kind of self-reflection in terms of like, why did I do the things I did? Why am I always running away? What am I running from? All those kinds of things. And can I grow, and can I, change, and can I like her apologizing to Roxy, in their fight, is a great little beat. And I love the Roxy stuff. Like, so do we want to make out now? No, we're not doing that.
We're just friends. Friends with benefits? No, worth a shot.
Yeah.
And then shout out to Kim trying it out, and like, not for me, worth a shot.
Yep.
And then shout out to the Lucas Lee, like, did you, whatever?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, she goes, whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Such a good like note on that. It's like Brian Lee O'Malley getting to like repair up his characters in a way that makes like a little bit more sense, or not even more sense. Just like, what if these characters didn't blow up into coins? What happens to them? Matthew Patel gets like his own, like him overthrowing Gideon in episode 2 is fucking fantastic.
Yeah, and then he gets and he hates it.
He goes, I don't want to be
billions of dollars, and all he wants to do is have a one-man show on Broadway,
and he successfully does because it's the Scott Pilgrim. Well, it's not a one-man show. It's an off-Broadway show.
Yeah, off-Broadway show.
But he plays Scott Pilgrim.
He had a one-man show earlier where he's singing something from Agony. Yeah, there it is. Yeah. There you go. Another Chris Pine reference.
Yep.
Because Chris Pine played one of the princes in the Into the Woods movie.
Yep. It's just so good. It's top to bottom excellent, especially if you're a longtime Scott Pilgrim fan. Once again, reinforcing the point of Scott Pilgrim is like, hey, we can all be shitty people, but we can all grow and reflect and become better. Yeah.
And there's another one, the animation, so good, pulling from the original source material stuff. Edgar Wright getting to like also do another stab at this kind of stuff, and also poke fun at himself. Edgar Wrong being the director of the movie within the show kind of thing.
All the cameos, by the way, whether it's
shout out to Simon Pegg and Nick Frost as the security guards, enjoying some cornetto in the
ice cream
final episode.
So good. It's also shout out to them making fun of the fact like Scott Pilgrim, the movie was like $17 million over budget, being like, yeah, you have like all this stuff happening, just great stuff, great poking fun at movie productions in general being a nightmare. Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff.
And I love that it also still leaves the door open for a season 2,
maybe
with Gordon Goose and what he and Julie Powers, what they're up to.
Yep. Shout out to that. Like, shout out to Gordon Goose and like all that stuff. And it's like, they called him No Fear because he wore No Fear t-shirts to school.
And he just didn't get they were calling him Fearless, ironically.
Yeah.
Because they called him Fearless.
Yeah, Fearless. That's right. They call him Fearless, ironically. He went up and asked the most popular girl out in school out, and she turned him down, and it destroyed him.
Yeah. Just lots and lots of good stuff. Any final thoughts here on Scott Pilgrim Takes Off?
Watch it. It's so good. If you like, why are you still listening to us talking about it? If you haven't watched it, watch it.
Yeah.
It's unbelievably good.
Great. All right, then we will go ahead and wrap up here. Thank you, Cam, for joining me to go over a number of things in this episode. I follow Cameron at Rev Cabot, 2 B's and 2 T's. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Cam?
Yeah, give a massive shout out to that D Plus show. We just did Far From Home as an episode, so go check that out. We continue our journey through the Marvel Spider-Verse with that episode, so go check that out. We had a great time.
Yeah. Cool. Yes. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey on Twitter. And I will give a shout out to, the Let's Plays. You can find Let's Plays on youtube.com/thatnerdysite. We're doing still firmly in Baldur's Gate 3 territory. I had to re-record a couple episodes, one that went live last week, one that'll go live this week. So enjoy that. And in particular, this week, we're going to dive into the House of Hope, which is one of my favorite kind of sections of the game. So definitely go give that some time if you are so inclined. You follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please rate, review, like, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Thank you for listening. As always, stay nerdy and be good to each other.